Hello, happy Tuesday, February 28th. Is this the last? It is. It's the last day in February.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting. And the last week before town meeting break, so hoping to wrap some things up this week before we sort of enter crossover land. So today we're looking at 217. And then doing an update on school budgets. And then we actually have to do our budget appropriations memo that we have not done yet. So to start off the conversation on 217, Representative Williams, do you want to join us?
Hello, everyone.
And I invited a number of folks to see if they wanted to testify, sort of the usual lineup of folks who are interested in workers' comp and insurance issues. And they all said that they were fine and would leave us be, but they were available if we had questions. So that is why we have such a short witness list today. Representative Williams, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Representative Jonathan Williams of the city of Barrie. My seatmate is your colleague, Peter Anthony. This is H217, which was passed out of our committee at a 10-0-1 vote, and it deals with workers' compensation insurance. The first section of the bill is what is done, I believe, every year up to date, year to date, which is setting the annual rate of contribution for the Workers' Compensation Administration Fund. What this is it is a premium written by workers' compensation insurance carriers for Vermont employers, and this is an amount on top of that. It was 1.5% last year, and this bill sets it at 1.5% again this year. And the money goes to DOL Workers' Comp Division, which settles disputes between or resolves issues, mediates between employees and employers. The second part of this bill does the following, and it is basically setting in statute that allows the calendar year premium for workers' compensation to remain unchanged from the prior fiscal year in the event that the General Assembly does not establish the rate of contribution for the direct calendar year premium for workers' compensation. So,
Representative Williams, can I, and Damian will walk us through the whole bill and all of
yes,
the excruciating detail that he thrives on.
apologies. Getting it to
I'm curious about sort of the policy conversation, the policy decision around setting the default rate, which we do in a lot of other places in statute, and we haven't done on this yet, but sort of was there a problem your committee was trying to solve?
Not to my knowledge, but I think this is more along the lines of housekeeping, in that if the legislature does not act.
Yeah, no, we shouldn't trust ourselves. That's a good point.
I think the issue was that it got set at the very end of the last
Yes.
year, at the end of the biennium, and so it was down to the wire, and so, as such, yeah.
Great.
So section 2 allows, enters into statute that it shall just renew at the rate the year prior. Section 3 is the most complicated portion of this bill. Should an employer terminate benefits provided by workers' compensation, an employee may object to the termination with the Vermont Department of Labor. This enshrines what was last year a temporary provision. It permits a claimant to file with the Commissioner of the Department of Labor an objection to the discontinuance of benefits, in which they may seek an extension of 14 calendar days, bringing the total number of calendar days in which an employee receiving benefits may have their benefits extended to 21. As payments initially continue for 7 days after the notice is submitted by the employer and received by the commissioner and the employee. That is calendar days, not business days, which was a point of clarification. And we heard testimony from Ledge Council, the Office of Directors of Workers' Compensation and Safety with the Vermont Department of Labor, among others. And again, it passed out with 10-0-1, and we ask for your support. Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Questions? Yeah.
That section 3, I'm not sure I understand what's going on there. They're changing to calendar days. Why?
Sorry. It is calendar days. It has been calendar days. Originally, it was, they may only have 7 days to resolve a dispute. Last year, the legislature added a temporary provision that would extend it by 14 days, in which the Department of Labor may weigh in and choose to either permit the benefits to be terminated or to have them extended by the employer. This essentially is an extension of 14 days to the original 7, is my understanding.
Oh, okay. Okay. It's easier than I thought.
Yes. And we did hear testimony that the insurance providers and the employers are all okay with this. It seems to be working just fine
Okay.
with the extension.
Thanks for joining us. Oh, sorry. Representative Canfield.
Is there a sunset involved here that we're,
No, this would make this provision permanent. It was temporary last year. Are you referring to section 3?
yeah,
No, there is no sunset on this, to my knowledge.
I can explain to you what's happening there.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Damian, the floor is yours,
Wonderful.
isn't it?
It's always great to get ways and means.
Feeling really happy about this. What I had said.
Well, I'll try not to bring you guys down.
For the record, Damian
Leonard, Legislative Council. So the bill in front of you, H217, does really 3 things. So each year, this committee sees the annual Workers' Compensation Administrative Fund fee that comes up from House Commerce or across the hall in the past. This year, it keeps the fee at 1.5%, which is the same as what we set it at last year. The way the statute works on it, there is a default rate set in statute, but then it says the legislature has to update the rate each year. And so each year we pass this language. The self-insured workers' compensation losses have been at 1% for as long as I've been doing this job, and they're set at 1% in the statute. The statute actually only provides that we would update the rate of contribution on the premiums, not on the self-insured losses. But we include them in the language every year. It's important to note we're looking at premiums, so premiums for insurance policies versus actual losses on self-insurance. Does that make sense? Great.
Damian, are you able to share your?
Oh, absolutely. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
So
And if it seems like it'll take a long time to set it up, it's really okay. We could just skip it.
that's okay. I'll get it going in the background and we'll talk about the next section. So section 2 of the bill deals with, well, to back up, in the last couple of years, this language has come up to the committee, but we've had a couple of close calls with it almost not making it across the finish line because it was included in a bill that either stalled somewhere in the process or had something like a poison pill added to it somewhere in the process, so it got held up because of that language. Or for whatever reason, that bill wasn't the vehicle that got chosen to move forward, and so we've had to search for a place for that language. The risk of that is that if that language doesn't get through, then potentially the workers' compensation program at DOL doesn't have funding. So what the section 2 would do is it would It would basically add a default. Just bear with me here for a second. So it would add a default that would basically say that in the event that we do not establish a rate, it just stays at the rate from the last year. So generally the rate changes by 0.1% if it changes at all. Changes have been fairly slow, so this would guarantee funding to the program, and it would only be off slightly in most scenarios. And it would basically be an insurance policy for the General Assembly. If, for example, you couldn't get the funding bill through, or it would also take the pressure off if the rate was supposed to not change. You wouldn't have to do anything.
In my experience, usually when we put sort of these defaults in statute, they're usually set up more like threats than like base defaults. And this one's really more of a base default than a threat.
Yeah.
And maybe this is more, I don't know if you have thoughts on that or if I should ask.
So I'd let the department, they propose the language, I'd let them speak to their reasoning for it. But my understanding was that this wasn't intended to be a threat, just basically a safety net. Questions on the section beyond that? Okay. And then, so section 3. So you'll see here, we're amending 2014 Acts and Resolves number 199. So this language dates back, so that's actually the 2015 session. And so it dates back, we're looking at about 8 years back on this language. And what happened was this was a trial program. After the initial trial, there wasn't enough data to really make a decision whether to make it permanent. So we extended the trial. It expires this July 1. And what we're amending here is actually the sunset language. So this is the language that would have reverted back to the old statute. And what we've done to avoid that, and this avoids having to either do stuff that's really opaque, or make changes that are really complicated with multiple sections. We're just adding back in the exact same language that would have been taken out by this. So this is the sunset section reverting back to old language, but with the language we've been using for the last 8 years added in the underlined section here. Make sense? Great. And that is it for the bill, and it's effective on passage. The reason for that is because I don't want to have the change to that sunset taking effect on the same day the sunset's taking effect. I just don't want any questions about whether it actually takes effect. So. Great.
Thank you. Mr. Dickerson, hello.
Good afternoon. Just a moment, I'll share my screen. And see.
Can we hire? Oh, with we can't with the screen sharing. You want to start? Okay.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay.
Thanks.
So for the most part, this bill is pretty simple. You heard about it. It's establishing the rates for fiscal year 24. It's creating sort of a stopgap provision so that in the event that the General Assembly doesn't actually set the rate, it just defaults to the prior year. So the fiscal note estimates no new impacts to state revenues, but because you are setting this rate, you are you are authorizing revenue to be collected in this bill. And so the estimate is about roughly 2.5 million in FY24 from the two assessments. The big one is the 1.5% on employers, and then the much smaller one is the 1% for self-insured and then I think losses of corporations. And there's a little bit of extra just detail on the workers' compensation fund and then this piece on discontinuance of benefits. I reached out to the Department of Labor and they indicated that in the past 4 or 5 years, maybe even more, there have been probably about 2,500 discontinuance notifications from employers, and of that, there are probably about 200 to 300 objections that have been dealt with, and so that's over multiple years. So it hasn't really been a burden on staff to process those. So they don't believe that keeping this piece in statute perpetually would have any material impact on their ability to staff or do what they need to with the staff that they have, essentially. So it's not creating new costs. I will note that the employer rate was increased last year from 1.4% to 1.5%. And that was, the department was anticipating a decrease in the overall workers' compensation premiums. And so they wanted to ensure that they were getting the ongoing funding they needed to cover their staff. And the fund has carried a fairly significant balance, but I think they had, and you could probably get more detail from the department because they're here, but they had anticipated spending a lot of this on an IT update that I think was going to cost several million. So you'll see on this 3-year sort of look, they spent more than they brought in last year, and I would expect most likely that would be the same case in FY23. And then once the IT project is completed, it should level out. So that is the fiscal note.
Cool.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Any questions for me?
I don't think so. Thanks, though. I appreciate it. Do you all want to just come say something nice? Since you're sitting there and all.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, members of the committee. I'm Dirk Anderson. I am the Director of Workers' Compensation for the Department of Labor. Cameron Wood is with me, our Legislative Policy Director and Unemployment Insurance Director. Thank you for considering this. We did ask for this bill, and as Damian said, the real benefit of setting a default rate is that currently we have an affirmative obligation to come to you every year and say, please give us money. And if that could take the form of a standalone bill or could get tacked onto the fee bill. Last year, we did not actually get that appropriation until either the second to last or the last day of the session. So arguably, Damian and I have talked about this, but in the absence of an appropriation, I have no money to run a program. And everybody has to collect unemployment from Mr. Wood here, and that makes him grumpy. So in this case, if we feel we've got enough money at the 1.5%, we don't have to come back to you and ask you for a change in the rate. So there doesn't necessarily need to be a bill. If we think we need to decrease the rate or increase the rate, and for some reason that gets hung up and does not pass, at least we have a fallback of being funded at the previous year's level. So that was the ask, and I appreciate your support.
Great, thanks. Anyone have any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, I move that we vote H217 out of committee.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Representative Demrow moved that we find the bill favorable. Representative Anthony seconded. Representative Andrews, that was a little quick. Are you?
I'm ready to go.
Then you're welcome to call the roll. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrews, yes. Anthony,
Yes.
Beck,
Yes.
Brannigan,
Yes.
Demrow,
Yes.
Maslin,
Yep.
Matos,
Yes.
Odie,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Canfield,
Yes.
Kornheiser,
Yes.
12-0-0.
Thank you. Representative Anthony's gonna report the bill. We're gonna take a 10-minute break for our fast forward